very good morning to everyone. We are excited. I hope you are as excited as we are for this conference. And already you can tell the kind of the speakers that we have in this conference. Amazing, amazing women. And of course, Dr. Habil on the various insights they've already shared with us. And in the next panel, I have a power-packed women lined up for you and speakers ready to deliberate on the effective ways of handling headwinds in this dynamic environment. So shortly, I'll be introducing my panel, and I hope you have your pen and paper because the wealth of knowledge that these women have is amazing. So better sit back and enjoy, and you'll learn a lot. So before then, allow me to put in a few housekeeping rules. So you have a chat box on your screen in case you want us to know where you're watching us from, or you'd like to leave a comment for us, please put it on the chat. We will have a session where we'll ask questions and answers. We will be responding to your questions at the end of this session. So if you have a question to any of the panelists, please feel free to put it in the Q&A tab, and we'll have a moment to answer them. So thank you and welcome. And straight away, allow me to welcome my panel, amazing women. And in no particular order, I'll start with Mary Wamai, the Executive Director of Equity Group Holdings. Welcome, Mrs. Wamai, and thank you for being part of this session. Secondly, allow me to welcome Ms. Diane Karusisi, the CEO of Bank of Kigali. So we're doing Pan-African Conference. It's actually global, so the speakers are amazing. And welcome, Diane, and we look forward to hearing what amazing things you're doing in Kigali. Allow me to also introduce Hedwig Niens, the Managing Director of the International Banking Federation in London. So welcome, Ms. Hedwig. We look forward to hearing about the international, what you're doing in the international scope, that you can add value to us today. So the fourth panelist is Ms. Esther Chibesa, the Managing Director, Citigroup, also handling the she's also head of Treasury and Trade Solutions in Sub-Saharan Africa. So like I said, amazing panelists, and we are ready to dig in and hear what they have for us today. So to start us off, allow me to start with a poll question. And we'd like to hear from you today. And we know this conference has women leaders from across the globe in the banking sector. So we'd like to know what you've been doing in your various sectors and in your various countries, what has worked so far, because we're talking about these turbulent times and everyone is experiencing it. So to start us off is the poll, and it's already on your screen. And what the poll is all about is that we want to hear the leadership choice that you have focused on in particular to enhance the operating resilience in your environment as a result of this COVID crisis. So I'll give you under a minute to just read through the answers and let us know what is your particular focus at this particular time and what you have done and maybe what has worked for you. So I'll give you under a minute for you to respond so you can read through. And for the sake of the people who are on Facebook Live, allow me to read for you the various options. And these are catalyzing the identification of new business opportunities. Is that what you've been doing? Is it accelerating investments in digital transformation? We know that everyone has gone digital right now. So is it strengthening leadership? Is it team cohesion? What are you doing? We would like to hear. So share with us. Are you reassessing your talent? Are you strengthening and you're looking for opportunities for upskilling? Are you identifying weaknesses in business continuity procedures? So we'd like to hear from you. So in the next 30 seconds or so, please let us know what you're doing on your end as we get ready to answer some interesting facts and to hear from our panelists. So like we said, the discussion is all about peak performance. How do you ensure peak performance even in turbulent times? So we'd like to hear what you've been doing. What have you focused on already in particular? What is working for you? So we'll be closing the poll in a minute or two. So we'd like to hear. And my first speaker will be Ms. Esther Chibesa. But before I introduce her, we'd like to hear. So we have the results of the poll. So let's see. So 47% are saying accelerating investments in digital transformation. That's definitely expected. So everyone has gone digital. So that's interesting. So secondly is strengthening leadership and team cohesion. Interesting. That's at 43%. Then catalyzing the identification of new business opportunities comes third. Identifying weaknesses in business continuity procedures comes fourth. And then reassessing talent and opportunities for upskilling. So thank you very much for sharing with us. So allow me to go to my first speaker and to welcome Esther Chibesa. And Ms. Esther, we'd like you to share some insights. And from the 11 countries that you're already operating in and 15 that you're even not present in, we'd like to hear how you've been, what are the various perspectives on fiscal and monetary policy in the regions? How do they compare? And how can different countries learn from each other?
Thanks very much, and good morning to all the participants, all protocols observed. It's really a pleasure to be joining the group this morning. So we're 9 months into this particular human crisis, which means we've moved through various stages, right? We've moved from active crisis management through to managing for cash. And now, I think many of us are really thinking about how we position for reimagine. I think fiscal and monetary actions across the region have been fairly even and have been designed really to take into account what the particular social and economic contract has been that has been obtaining on the ground really looks like. So many of them will look the same. There's been obviously tax holidays, measures to improve incomes by doing things like VAT refunds, changing tax structures, and so on and so forth, giving holidays. Social measures would have been things like social cash transfers that have been instituted, accelerated, or increased in value across many of those countries. Monetary policy measures that have been taken have been, actions such as the reduction of things like policy rates, the reduction of statutory reserve rates, and so on and so forth. So in terms of the type of actions taken, I would say fairly even across all of the countries. But I think the questions we should be asking is really what are the actions that will be effective, whichever industry they're in, whichever regulator is thinking about them. I would say there are those that achieve fiscal, social, and environmental resilience in response to the crisis. And those I would categorize as follows. Actions that have used or will effectively use deep data and convert that into intelligent insights for purposes of decisioning and a very good feedback loop. So here are some examples. There's an entity called ESRI, which collects location data in 15 countries across Africa to monitor, manage, and communicate the impact of the crisis. And that's important because it goes back to policymakers who can then use that data to really design the appropriate response. That's a social resilience action. That could also be a fiscal resilience action. Actions in investment in technology platforms and digital infrastructure in order to accelerate the uptake of digital access. And we've heard a lot about that. And that's true whether you're in health, financial services, or social protection. So in banking, we saw regulators lead the way in terms of the lowering of fees, the increase of wallets, sizes, and so on and so forth. But kudos to our regulators across the continent. Regulators like BCAO and the BCC in the Congo that are driving interoperable payments. Tanzania's GPG, which while it was pre-COVID, brings further efficiencies for fiscal regulation, which is a crucial ingredient when we think about fiscal resiliency. Actions that advance the legal and ethical use of digital identity, digital signatures, changes in policy, so as to enable digital inclusion, which is really not the same thing as financial inclusion. And I'm of the view here that Kenya has really led the way, prior to the crisis through legislations like the Kenya Information and Communication Act, which enabled the use of things like e-signatures and so on and so forth, the recent installation of a data protection officer. And I think there's a lot of work there that policymakers can do to drive a uniform response for other industries, to really, drive forward. I would also say that actions that have used a strong element of community inclusion so that there is acceptance while implementing. And here, I think rather than give an example, I will pose a challenge for us, right? I think one sector that is crying out for community-led action is actually education, the learning sector, where so many of our youth are. the average age of our youth is 19 in Africa. And my own personal opinion is that the youthfulness of our population might have a lot to do with the way in which this crisis is playing out on the continent. But aside from that, I think education is one sector that is crying out for further investment. And that investment, in my view, would probably best be realized if we have communities, mothers, who are probably the ones that are driving that interaction between the school and the child in designing effective responses.
Thank you, Esther. Interesting facts there about using data and community inclusion. And we will get back to you, Esther, especially in the question and answer session. But allow me to loop in Ms. Wamai. And in your view, and in midst of COVID, there's a sense that some sectors have benefited greatly in this time. And there are also others who have really been affected adversely. So do you mind sharing some insights on that, Mrs. Wamai?
Thank you, Monica, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to the forum and all the participants. Yeah, you are right. The first thing is the COVID-19 started as a health crisis, but obviously because of the measures that had to be taken to contain the crisis, it then generated into an economic crisis. And that is what we are dealing with, in addition, of course, to the health aspect of it. And I think the data is saying it all, that the impact on the economy has been very, very dramatic, very drastic. And I think all the sectors have been affected because, and we know for those who are in banking and financial institutions, we are dealing with a cross-section of customers that are operating in different diverse sectors. And so we've been able to see the impact it is creating, even for ourselves. Now, why we are dealing with this is, first of all, because of the measures that had been taken to contain the virus. Of course, all the countries went into lockdown, of course, at different levels. Some of the countries, like Rwanda, for instance, I know it was complete, total lockdown, the same with the Uganda. Even Kenya, for some time, it was very, very severe. I mean, everyone, we are being told stay at home. That disrupted the economic activities and the employment cycles. That, of course, led to when the airlines, the hotels were stopped, the hotels were shut down. It has led to layoffs. So that has also disrupted the income flows for some of the population. Because obviously the companies could not sustain the workforce, the payrolls, and all that. So that has set out a general problem. Now, if you look at the mining sector, for instance, it was affected because of the general impact of disruption of the value chain and the supply chain. So you may be able to produce, but at limited capacity because of the lockdown measures, but where do you take your produce? And yet flights have been canceled, the transport is curtailed, its movement is curtailed, etc., etc. So some of the sectors very badly affected were hotel and accommodation. Mining was also affected for those countries who have a big chunk of the economy there. Of course, we have the building and construction industry because the rentals were curtailed because of the income, which was also curtailed for the tenants. Now, but let me also talk a little bit about the positive aspect of it. Now, if you look at sectors like, or if I may just call it a sector, the digital sector, and I'm so happy to see that all of us are focusing, most of us are focusing on the digital transformation aspect. That is really the way to go because customers have resorted to digital transactions, and that has seen an upsurge in digital activity. So anyone with investments in digital is doing a very, very good business. For the transport and logistics, we have seen the people who have a good delivery, like online, offline delivery, home deliveries and all that doing very, very well. So that is to say that we should look for the opportunities that this crisis has presented to us both as leaders and also as consumers, to be able to do some good business. E-commerce will be a big thing going forward. We had already started even before the crisis. But what is happening now is that everybody is fast tracking the digital and also the e-commerce initiatives, because it is apparent now that that is a big, big opportunity for us. If you look at agriculture, and the keynote speaker talked about this very elaborately, we have to eat even with or without a crisis. Supply of food, delivery of food, production of food, value addition is a very, very critical opportunity that we need to explore, and that we need to advise our customers and our partners and everybody else to explore and see what are the opportunities available there. So my message is that there's an opportunity in this crisis. All we need to do is to look hard enough, and we are going to be able to identify that opportunity, both as women leaders and as leaders generally, because there's a lot that we can do with it. Thank you a lot, Monica.
Some of the things that we are now calling new normal, for example, working from home, for example, e-commerce, everyone is going e-commerce and digital. And Ms. Hedwig Nuyens, being the managing director of the International Banking Federation, which is also a representative body of major banking associations from the US, Australia, Canada, what practical tips would you recommend from the lessons that we have learned that can be adopted to be market practices, in your view?
Yes, thank you so much, Monica. It's a great pleasure for me to participate in this conference. And if I'm looking at the lessons learned for myself and the banking industry, as I represent the banks across the world, I would say there are three major lessons learned. And I'm very keen not only to talk about the lessons learned at macro level, global level, for banks, but also lessons learned for each of us. And I will also share what I learned myself as a personal journey in this. So first of all, we said it before, there is that acceleration to a digital world, a fully digital world. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing for all of us. It's a good thing for Africa. Lessons learned for the banking industry is that we have to be even faster as banks to move to that digital transformation, and that we should not forget financial inclusion, access to cash, and also access to mobile devices. And so really make sure that we help our clients to be able to access those tools. I must say, for each of us, me personally as well, I really took up this opportunity being at home. I'm in my kitchen today, London is closed. What I did as a kind of opportunity in this lockdown is to take up online courses. So that's something, dear ladies, all of us can do. There is so much more knowledge available on the net. Podcasts. I registered for 2 courses at MIT and INSEAD, so there are great business schools open for business. It is much cheaper to do it online, so it's something you can do, every single participant in this conference, if you want to really enrich your network, your CV, do it now. First, the second lessons learned is that COVID-19 is a major wake-up call for all of us. This is a major crisis, and global problems will need global solutions. And it's actually a kind of warming up exercise for the climate change that will follow just beyond. And banking industry is ready to find solutions, has actually be part of the solution with COVID-19, and will actually also provide those same instruments once we are even more in the midst of the climate change exercise. Personal lessons learned, what I did learn, I found it awful in the beginning. I was scared to death with the COVID crisis, but I learned that this can also be an opportunity for your personal resilience. And as I've been listening and looking at all those great women, indeed we have to juggle and to do different things at the same time. In the midst of this crisis, I have a wonderful husband, but who fell really very, very ill. And so COVID was already very awful, and that illness came on top. But I thought, okay, this is also an opportunity to do this together. We're at home together, and we will recover together. So it's also an exercise for us all, personal resilience, and your fitness, your health is important, and that's something you can do. And the third thing is that while we see that COVID-19 is really asking for such enormous solutions, it's also a wake-up call for all the banking industry to find new solutions. And the recovery and rescue programs nearly all include building back better. Building back better and together. And that's very important. So it's not just spoiled money, it's investment in our future. And what I would say as a personal lesson, you can be overwhelmed with such a crisis. But what I thought, okay, what can I do? Me as a person, as a manager, as a responsible citizen, what can I do to help stop this crisis? And tomorrow, or already today, what can I do to help and mitigate climate change? Thank you.
Thank you very much, even for giving us personal lessons and insights that we can learn from for our personal growth. Thank you. I hope everyone is looking to register for some e-commerce or e-lessons online. So thank you very much, Edwin. So from statistics, and this is to Diane Karusisi, and you being a CEO of one of the largest commercial banks in Kigali, and from statistics, we've seen that the well-managed crisis, the countries that have managed their crisis very well, they've been led by female leaders. So Taiwan, New Zealand, Germany, Norway. So in your view, what is it about this women leadership that we can learn from that has turned this COVID crisis to COVID kairos, in your view, Ms. Diane?
Thank you, Monica, and thank you for the organizers for having me on this very exceptional conference. So you're right. I think in business and in politics, leaders of the world have spent the past few months, 9 months now, facing real-time leadership tests. And all I can say is that this crisis has been a sort of an equalizer, because countries that are powerful, wealthy, has been hit just as much as countries that are poor, sometimes in the developing world, etc. And this crisis has rendered experience and expertise sometimes irrelevant, because it's the first of its kind for many of us. And we really had to learn as we were managing the crisis. So now it is true that in several countries around the globe, women are the helm of effective and inclusive COVID-19 response efforts. So you've talked about Hong Kong, New Zealand, Germany, Norway, and Taiwan. They've done much better than similar countries that are male-led with similar profiles in terms of socio-economic and demographic characteristics that have been very important in the transmission of this virus. So these phenomenal women leaders, I would like to call them phenomenal, are being recognized across the globe for the rapidity of their response in their countries, which has not only included measures to flatten the curve, such as confinement measures, social distancing, etc. But actually something that is very important, they are being recognized for the transparent and compassionate communication of information to their population, to their teams, etc. I think that is very important. And that is a very important aspect of this leadership style for women. So normally, I think for us women leaders in business and in politics, most of the times our leadership style is described as collective, more collaborative. And I think in this particular crisis with so many unknowns and uncertainties, it was important to have your ears open to listen to people, to listen to experts, which sometimes I think women do much better than men, because they're open to learn more, to new knowledge, etc. So this has been very important in managing this crisis. Now, when I think about the response of these phenomenal women leaders, I want to ask myself and to ask everybody, is it that really that women leaders are doing better? Or is it that there are men or male peers in these powerful countries that I won't name? We know them all. Is it that they're just doing worse? You know, is it that we are looking at how these powerful countries manage the crisis, and look at the massive failures and saying, look, these women has managed better? Is it that? The other question I also want to ask everyone is, why does it take this crisis, a crisis of this magnitude, to recognize that these women lead are actually phenomenal? Because we have known that Germany, leaders in Germany, in New Zealand, in Taiwan have done extraordinarily well. So we waited to have these crisis leaders. Now, the other point I want to make to close my few remarks is that to a large extent, women leaders are not a cause of better government or better organizations. I think they are rather a symptom, because in fact, having a female leader is already a signal that an institution or country has more inclusive policies, values talent from diverse backgrounds, they value ideas and perspective from gender diversity, etc. So already these countries or these institutions that have placed women at a leadership position are already better because they're more inclusive, and because they are better, they're likely also to fare better in a crisis like the crisis that we are living today. So I want to close by saying that my hope is that this crisis will open the eyes of everyone, and that perhaps people will learn to recognize and value women leadership that is probably a bit more caring, thoughtful, and sometimes risk averse, because in this case, because it's a health crisis to start with, you have to be risk averse when it comes to lives of people, lives of your citizens, your colleagues. So it's very important to be risk averse, and I'm hoping that the world and politicians, citizens, and even people in our organization will learn to recognize and value women leadership. Thank you very much again for having me.
Thank you very much. And we whatever work you're doing out there, we see it, and we celebrate you being at the helm of Bank of Kigali. And thank you for being with us. So amazing deliberations. I hope everyone has taken notes. I hope someone is learning something. I hope that we are taking these recommendations and putting them into action. I saw someone asking under Q&A, how do we move from talk to action? And I see Arun Maute already gave a response to that, so we will not go to that. So from us, we'd like to close for this panel discussion, but we hope that you have learned and you have taken notes and you have action points that you're going to turn, talk points that you're going to turn into action. And thank you very much to my panel. It's been a pleasure being your moderator for this session, and these amazing panelists. Thank you very much for teaching us and giving us insights. And we hope next time we will be seated where you're seated. I'm sure many women where they are saying the same. So I'd like to leave you with a quote, and this is from a friend, and he said, we always say that behind every successful man, there's a woman, but maybe it's time to say that behind every unsuccessful virus is a woman leader. How about that? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being your moderator. Thank you and good morning.